"We cannot continue like this," Tharnak said, more to himself than to the assembled officers behind him. The room was filled with the silence of unspoken defeat. "That's where I come in," a voice cut through the stillness. General Tharnak turned to see Captain Andre, a tall human dressed in battered armor, standing casually at the edge of the chamber. Andre's presence here was unusual, his reputation preceding him. A mercenary, an outsider, and a wild card. The Zaltari commanders exchanged nervous glances, unsure how to address someone so outside the rigid structure of their military. Tharnak narrowed his eyes. "I didn't ask for your counsel, Captain." Andre smirked and took a step forward, his boots echoing against the polished floor. "No, but you need it. Your rules, your precious codes of war, they're killing you. The Ralkans are outsmarting you, bending the rules just enough to stay within the lines but still hit you where it hurts. You need unpredictability. You need someone who doesn't play by the rules." Tharnak's fingers twitched at the suggestion, but he didn't dismiss Andre outright. In truth, the human's words struck a chord. For decades, the Zaltari Empire had held the galaxy's most powerful armies, all bound by the strict codes that govern warfare. But now, in the face of a foe willing to exploit those very codes, their power seemed to wane. "And what would you propose?" Tharnak asked, his voice cold, yet curious. Andre's grin widened. "You hire us, human mercenaries. We fight the way your soldiers can't. We don't care about rules or codes. We care about winning. And right now, that's something you need more than your precious principles." One of the senior officers, a stern Zaltari named Commander Rixall, stepped forward, his voice laced with disdain. "You think we should abandon everything we've built for the sake of savagery? The galaxy runs on order, on laws of engagement. Without them, we are no better than animals." Andre shrugged. "Call it savagery if you want. I call it survival. The Ralkans are beating you at your own game. It's time to change the rules." Tharnak considered the mercenaries' words. The Zaltari's long-standing adherence to structure and discipline had been their strength. But now, with the Empire's borders shrinking, something had to change. His empire could not afford another loss, not when the very survival of their culture was at stake. "And if we were to employ you," Tharnak asked, his voice measured, "what would be the cost?" Andre leaned back slightly, his gaze calculating. "The usual credits, of course, and a guarantee that once we're done, we're free to go. We don't stick around for your politics or peace talks." The general's gaze hardened. "You think this galaxy is a playground for you to come and go as you please?" "No," Andre replied evenly. "I think this galaxy is falling apart because you're too proud to adapt. You hire us, we help you win. Or don't, and watch your empire burn." The room was tense, officers shifting uncomfortably as Andre's words hung in the air. Commander Rixall, still visibly angered, turned to Tharnak. "General, you cannot seriously be considering this. We have rules for a reason. Bringing these humans into our ranks will only erode what little order we have left." Tharnak remained silent for a long moment, his mind racing. He could feel the weight of his ancestors pressing down on him, the responsibility of protecting the empire they had built through centuries of disciplined warfare. But those methods, it seemed, were no longer enough. The Ralkans were proof of that. Finally, Tharnak nodded, his decision made. "We will hire the humans." A ripple of shock passed through the chamber. Rixall opened his mouth to protest, but was silenced by a sharp look from Tharnak. "We are on the verge of collapse," Tharnak continued, his voice heavy with authority. "If the humans can help us regain what we've lost, then we will use them. But understand this, Captain Andre. If you fail, if your methods bring chaos to the Zaltari, it will be your head that rolls." Andre gave a mock salute, his smile never faltering. "Understood, General. But don't worry. Chaos is exactly what we specialize in." As Andre turned to leave, Tharnak's gaze lingered on the holographic map once more. the shifting lines of their borders casting faint, blue light across his face. His decision was made, but a dark unease settled in his chest. He had opened the door to something unpredictable, something dangerous. The human mercenaries were now part of the Empire's war machine. Whether they would save the Zaltari or destroy them from within, only time would tell. In the silence that followed, Tharnak's lieutenant stepped forward, his voice low. "You think this is wise, General?" Tharnak didn't answer. He only watched the map, as if searching for a way out of the chaos that was surely coming. The first battle had been a stunning success, at least on the surface. The Ralkan forces had been decimated, their ambushes thwarted by the unpredictable tactics of Captain Andre's human mercenaries. General Tharnak's gamble had paid off for now. The Zaltari Empire's soldiers, trained in the art of precision warfare, had watched in awe and horror as the humans used strategies that defied their rigid doctrines, ambushes in neutral zones, targeting supply lines, and overwhelming the enemy with sheer brutality. But as word of the victory spread, so too did the uneasy whispers. Across the galaxy, factions took notice. The humans, once considered a chaotic, unpredictable species, were now being viewed as a wild card with untapped potential. Other alien empires, wary of the Zaltari's newfound advantage, began to question their own adherence to the rigid codes of war. And so, one by one, they started to break them. Andre and his mercenaries became a commodity. In the wake of their victory, the Ralkans retaliated, bending the rules further, leading other factions to scramble for mercenaries of their own. It wasn't long before Andre was approached by other empires, eager to secure the human services, offering credits and promises of greater freedom in exchange for victory. "You're in high demand," Tharnak remarked one evening as he stood with Andre in the war room. The general's face, once stern and decisive, now held a glimmer of unease. "The Ralkans are desperate. They've started employing their own mercenaries, other human groups." Andre crossed his arms, unfazed by the general's concern. "That's how it works. Wars are about who has the edge, and right now, everyone's trying to tip the scales in their favor." Tharnak's eyes narrowed. "Do you realize what you've done? Our wars were once orderly. Now, they've descended into chaos. The very system that held the galaxy together is starting to crumble." Andre shrugged, his expression unreadable. "Your system was already weak. We didn't break it. We just showed everyone the cracks." That was the heart of the problem. The Zaltari had always believed in order, rules that govern every aspect of life, including war. Battles were fought in designated areas, with specific tactics agreed upon in advance. But now, with the introduction of human mercenaries, those lines had blurred. No longer were battles confined to sanctioned fields of engagement. Now, they raged across planets, devastating cities and destroying innocent lives in their wake. Soon, the Ralkans weren't the only ones pushing the boundaries. The once orderly galaxy was unraveling as empires abandoned tradition in favor of raw power and victory by any means necessary. Mercenaries like Andre became kingmakers, their ruthless tactics shifting the balance of power. What was once a stable, rule-bound system had turned into a chaotic arms race for the most savage fighters. Across the galaxy, reports of devastation poured in. The planet Yera's once neutral territory had been bombarded by a rival faction's human mercenaries. Civilians who had once lived in peace were now collateral damage. Ancient treaties were ripped apart as quickly as they were drafted. The Galactic Council, powerless to stop the growing tide of lawlessness, stood by as the very fabric of their civilization began to tear. General Tharnak knew that the Zaltari's victories came at a cost. Each success in battle only encouraged other factions to hire more mercenaries, further destabilizing the galactic order. He found himself haunted by his decision to hire Andre. What had begun as a tactical choice was now spiraling out of control. In one such battle, on the barren planet of Harkon V, Andre and his mercenaries led the charge against the Ralkan forces. The battle was brutal, far removed from the precise, ritualistic engagements the Zaltari were accustomed to. Soldiers no longer fought with honor. They fought to survive. The human mercenaries attacked without warning, shifting their strategies mid-battle, confusing and overwhelming the Ralkans. But as the dust settled, Tharnak could see the toll it was taking on his own men. "They're losing their way," Tharnak said quietly, watching his once disciplined troops descend into disarray. His soldiers, inspired and horrified by the humans' effectiveness, had started to abandon their training. They were mimicking the very chaos they once feared. "We've unleashed something we can't control." Andre, standing beside him, seemed unfazed. "You wanted to win, General, and this is how you do it. You can't fight like it's a chess game anymore. This is war." "This isn't war," Tharnak said, his voice filled with regret. "It's annihilation." But Andre's influence only grew. Other human mercenary groups began to splinter off, forming alliances with rival factions. The galaxy's wars, once fought with rules, had devolved into a chaotic free-for-all, with no clear victor in sight. What had once been a struggle for territory and power was now a fight for survival in a galaxy where no rules applied. Back in the Zaltari capital, the Council of Elders convened, their faces drawn and pale as they confronted Tharnak. "This cannot continue," said one of the elders, her voice trembling with fear. "We must restore order, or we will lose everything." Tharnak stood before them, his posture rigid but his mind torn. He had started this descent by hiring Andre. Now, the mercenaries had become indispensable, but they were also the greatest threat to the galaxy's survival. He looked to Andre, the man who had promised him victory, and saw not a savior, but a destroyer. "We have to rein them in," Tharnak said quietly, "before the galaxy tears itself apart." But Andre's eyes glinted with something dark and knowing. "It's too late for that, General. The galaxy's already on fire. All we can do now is survive." And as the galaxy continued to unravel, Tharnak realized that Andre was right. The war had changed, and there was no going back. The battlefield stretched for miles across the broken plains of Drados IV, a once verdant world now reduced to ash and debris. Smoke hung heavy in the air, the sky darkened by the fires of countless battles. What had begun as a contained conflict between two factions had now drawn the entire galaxy into its spiral, with human mercenaries fighting for all sides. The chaos had reached its peak, and General Tharnak stood in the center of it all, watching his empire unravel. His forces were scattered, discipline eroded by months of guerrilla warfare and bloodshed. The Zaltari soldiers, once the finest in the galaxy, had lost the precision that had defined their every move. Now, they fought like animals, driven by the fear that the humans had unleashed. Tharnak felt the weight of his decision pressing down on him. The choice to bring in Captain Andre and his unpredictable mercenaries had shattered everything. On the horizon, Tharnak could see the shapes of the enemy, Ralkan forces, backed by their own human mercenaries, advancing relentlessly. The lines between ally and enemy had blurred beyond recognition. Battles were no longer about territory, honor, or strategy. They were about survival. Captain Andre approached from behind, his armor streaked with grime and blood, his face hardened by the relentless fighting. "This is it, General," Andre said, his voice steady, as though the destruction unfolding around them didn't faze him. "The final stand." Tharnak turned to face the man who had once promised him victory, his expression a mix of fury and despair. "Look at what you've done, Andre. The galaxy is burning. The order we fought to maintain is gone. All for what? A few victories?" Andre met his gaze without flinching. "This was inevitable. Your rules, the codes you clung to, they were illusions. They kept you comfortable while the rest of the galaxy suffered. You didn't hire us to play by those rules. You hired us to win." The words rang hollow now. Tharnak had once believed that victory could be contained within the limits of their traditions. But that belief had crumbled the moment Andre's mercenaries unleashed their brutal and anarchic tactics on the galaxy. What had started as a bid to outmaneuver the Ralkans had turned into a race to the bottom, each faction more desperate than the last to tear down the system that had held them together for centuries. In the distance, explosions rumbled as the Zaltari fleet exchanged fire with Ralkan warships. The battle was reaching its climax. Soldiers ran across the battlefield in disarray, weapons drawn, their faces twisted in desperation. The once dominant Zaltari Empire was now fighting for its life. "You knew this would happen," Tharnak accused, his voice trembling with a mix of rage and resignation. "You used us to light the match, and now the whole galaxy is burning." Andre's expression darkened, but there was a flicker of something deeper in his eyes. Regret, perhaps, though he buried it quickly. "I didn't make the galaxy this way. I just showed everyone what was already there. This chaos. It's what war truly is. The rules you lived by were just lies you told yourselves to feel in control." Tharnak's fists clenched at his sides, but deep down he knew Andre was right. The galaxy had always been a tinderbox, and it had only taken a spark to ignite it. He looked around at the devastation. The burning cities, the bodies scattered across the ground, the endless waves of violence, and felt a weight settle in his chest. This was the future he had unleashed. Suddenly, a series of explosions rocked the ground near them, sending a cloud of dust and debris into the air. Tharnak staggered, trying to regain his footing. Andre pulled him to his feet, his grip strong and unyielding. "We need to move," Andre said, his tone as cold and pragmatic as ever. "There's no saving this place." But Tharnak resisted, his eyes scanning the battlefield. He couldn't leave, not yet. "There's more at stake here than just this planet," he said, his voice hoarse. "The galaxy is on the brink of annihilation. This can't go on." Andre paused, his gaze hardening. "It already has. There's no putting this back in the bottle, Tharnak. The old order is dead. The only question now is who survives to build something new." Tharnak's heart sank. He had been a fool to believe that he could control the chaos he had unleashed. Now, all that remained was a shattered galaxy, tearing itself apart. A sudden cry went up from the Zaltari lines as the Ralkans began their final assault, pushing forward with brutal efficiency. Human mercenaries on both sides fought without regard for allegiance, their tactics vicious and unpredictable. Tharnak could barely tell who was fighting for whom anymore. Loyalties meant nothing now. As the Ralkan forces drew closer, Tharnak knew that this battle would be their last. The galaxy had reached its breaking point. There was no returning to the way things had been. The order he had spent his life defending had crumbled into dust. Andre turned to Tharnak, his eyes filled with a cold, unwavering certainty. "You wanted victory, General. Well, here it is. But it doesn't look the way you imagined, does it?" Tharnak's shoulders slumped, the weight of his choices crushing him. He looked out at the battlefield one last time, at the chaos and destruction he had helped create. "No," he whispered, barely audible over the sounds of war. "It doesn't." As the final wave of Ralkan soldiers crashed into their lines, Tharnak drew his weapon and charged into the fray, his mind clear for the first time in months. There was no more strategy, no more order, only survival. Behind him, Andre watched for a moment, his expression unreadable, before turning away and vanishing into the chaos of battle. The galaxy would burn, and he would survive. But as he disappeared into the smoke and blood, even he couldn't shake the feeling that something had been lost forever.